A very warm welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us for the next episode in our webinar series exploring social pedagogy concepts at turbulent times. Today, I'm really delighted to be talking about Lifeworld orientation, which is an important German concept, very much synonymous with social work and social pedagogy in Germany. And so there'll be four Germans basically presenting to you a little bit about Lifeworld orientation and why that's important and what the potential might be for how we can use Lifeworld orientation within the UK in particular, but also in any other country context and any different practice contexts as well. So I'm delighted to be joined by Bianka Lang from Essex County Council, by Renny Amayo from Bradford Council, and by Martin Schwarz from the Camphill Community in Glencraig, just north of Dublin. And I'm really delighted that you're all here as well, joining us. We've got the following program, which is very similar to what we usually do, which is I will give a brief outline of Lifeworld orientation to begin with, and then we'll have a fishbowl discussion with Renny, Bianka, and Martin before we have a bit of time to explore Lifeworld orientation with all of you and make some further connections to your practice, hopefully, and draw out some key learning points for practice towards the end, hopefully. So that's the plan. I think we'll just get started then. So the first thing to say about Lifeworld orientation is that it's been developed by Hans Tirsch, who's been a very influential German academic for many years. He developed the concept of everyday orientation in the late 1970s, and then that turned into Lifeworld orientation in the 1980s. And there's a lot of theoretical, philosophical, practical kind of background that's kind of come together to form what is now known and practiced as Lifeworld orientation. So I'm only able to really give you a tiny little glimpse of that because it's just so rich and in depth and detailed. Essentially, the assertion that Hans Tirsch was making was that we need to start in practice from people's direct experience, from their living contexts, from their life skills, and we need to focus on the strength of their self-responsibility. Yeah, so what can we actually do to help people gain more self-responsibility in their everyday practice? And so the start is very much the problems and the needs of people and their own interpretation of their situation. So what does their world look like? What does it feel like? What's their subjective reality? So it recognizes very much that reality isn't just one objective thing for everybody, but that is both constructed by us individually. So my reality, my world, how I experience what's happening around me is different to and unique from everybody else's. But also that socially we construct reality, we construct communities, we construct interactions between the institutions that are there in the community and the individuals, for instance, just to give you a tiny little idea of all the things that we socially construct. So Tirsch's assertion is that social pedagogy must immerse itself in the places where social problems become visible, and that is the life world, the complex realities of people's everyday lives. So that's where things like gender disadvantages, misogyny, domestic violence, drug, alcohol misuse, poverty, all of those kinds of things become visible in somebody's life, potentially, or hopefully not. So that kind of complexity is our starting point. That's where we need to look at what can we actually do to enable people to critically analyze their problems and to reflect on the social causes of individual problems, but but importantly, to find options to help people lead a more meaningful everyday life. So whilst they might not be responsible for the poverty that they experience, actually, what can we do to help them in the everyday so that they have a more meaningful life, and to kind of really help them make sense of these struggles that they experience, because they can be incredibly overwhelming. So the role of the social pedagogue is therefore to help people really, critically analyze what is going on, and to help connect the individual with political action as well. So this concern with social justice and well-being, and recognizing what we can do at a, in a political arena as well, at a local level, is really, really important in that respect too. So there's this wider concern with social justice and human rights that's really, really crucial to Lifeworld orientation as well. Now, Lifeworld orientation has these kinds of layers, if you want, in that we talk about Lifeworld at three different kind of levels, if you want. So there's the bit about the person's life world, and what can we do to help them cope, help them learn in the everyday. So what can we do to understand that all those kinds of things people learn in the everyday of their own life world. They build their identity, their life plans based on what they experience in the everyday, and their ambitions, their sense of hope is very much determined by what their world looks like, what they think they can achieve within that remit. So that's one important thing we need to understand. We might have great ambitions for them, but actually, would they have those ambitions? Would they have those life goals? Can they think beyond their own life world if they've never experienced, the opportunity of, say, go to university and what that might do for your career opportunities or things like that. There's also recognition that the everyday life world is very much a stage on which societal and political and structural demands are acted out. So by virtue of us as professionals offering support, that life world is kind of a little bit of a stage. There's expectations from society, from welfare organizations, from educational institutions, for instance, that play out in people's life world. Okay. And finally, there's this tension that people experience between how things are, the kinds of habits they have, what they do in the everyday, the coping strategies they might have developed, whether those are positive coping strategies or challenging coping strategies with negative effects, and how might things actually be different? That's the tension that we need to navigate as well. If somebody's kind of learned that the only way they can cope with their own struggle and their own anxiety and their own worries is by drinking, then actually, how do we give them an alternative view of how things might be different and how that might lead to a more successful, more meaningful everyday life in that sense? So we need to kind of constantly reflect on all these different layers. As Church puts it, we must consider life worlds shaped by gender, ethnicity, poverty, and exclusion. Life worlds representing the various phases of the human life cycle between infancy and old age. And above all, life worlds reflecting constellations of family, neighborhood, and friends, civic and community activities, and experiences in the world of work, consumerism, and politics. So as you can see, there's a lot going on that impacts on people's life worlds and on what their everyday really looks like, and therefore what's the most meaningful starting point for us to kind of really support them, and what we can do to kind of really get an insight into what their life is like and what might make most of a meaningful difference to them. To give you a clearer example of what that might be all about, I'm really delighted to welcome Bianka, who is a team leader in Essex County Council for one of the social work teams there. and has used a lot of basically Lifeworld orientation approaches in her practice. So over to you, Bianka.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Bianka Lang. I'm a trustee for SPA, but also a service manager in Essex County Council. Just for you to let you know that Essex, we don't use social pedagogy as a model in Essex. However, we use a relationship-based practice and strength-based approach. And I, of course, being a social pedagogue, use social pedagogy in supervision and in talks with workers around direct work. So, because that is really close to my heart, so I'm practicing social pedagogy. Although overall in Essex, it's not a model we currently use. But yeah, as you just, that fits quite well we use with every family we work with. So we work in child protection and child in need. We use cultural genograms as a direct work tool with families. So when workers go into a family, they start with a family tree, but with a cultural one. I can show you an example of that and talk a little bit more about that. If it works, I'll just try. I don't think it does. It doesn't work for me, sorry. Can you do the anonymized cultural genogram family X for me?
Yeah.
Okay, so although this one is quite a simplistic one, you can we use these genograms just to sit down with the family, with the parents, when we do direct work with parents, just to visualize their family, also with the young people, and then they can talk to us about patterns in the family, so we get an understanding of their lived experience and their life world. For example, this one, it's just a family X, has domestic abuse featuring in the parents, in the parents relationship, and we see on the other side, because it's 3 generational, our genograms, that there are some good relationships between the maternal grandparents and mum and the child. So you can put at the bottom your little index and choose what you want to, what colors you want to use for certain things. So there's, for example, the thick blue error, controlling behavior, domestic abuse. Yeah, it is Jacqueline. And it's just a brilliant tool when you sit down with a family to look at what is going on in the family, how do people feel about it. And families often then, when it's visualized, see the patterns for the first time, and then you can start and work with their skills and with their wishes, really, how they want to do things differently. So that is it's a really useful tool, and it always reminds me of the world life approach, because we need to get an insight as workers into the family, and then we can start working on changing sustainably behaviors or patterns that are risky for the young people, for the children. gives us a more holistic approach, I guess. And what is really good, I find, is when you start your intervention with a family, you do your cultural genogram. So it's not just the culture of the people, but also family cultures, family patterns that go in there, things people like to do. So you can use this to just put loads of different things in there. But when you start the intervention, say with a family where domestic abuse is prevalent, and then you do your intervention, and then at the end of your intervention, when things have changed, which we just discussed a case on Friday where that was the case, do a second cultural genogram that looks completely different because the domestic abuse is gone or because things have moved on. And that is also really nice for the family to have them, because they can see the journey they've been on with you together. Thank you, Gabriel. That is one example what we use and what we use to look at the lived experiences. I also can give you an example about another piece of direct work, which is the map, Gabriel. I was in supervision with a social worker who was stuck with a young person, a young teenager who had autism, and who used to walk to school in the morning and walk back from school to his home, and was randomly beaten up at times in different areas. He was definitely at risk of exploitation, but we couldn't make out, because he would always say, oh, I don't know the person, I was beaten up again. So we didn't really have an insight into what was going on for this young person. So I recommended the worker to do a drive around town with this young person, and then sit down afterwards and use a map of the town, the city, as a direct work tool, just to see what was happening for this young person. And the drive around, she did that on that day when we talked about it, the drive around in the car. So her and the young person were in the back, and a support worker drove them through town. That was such a good work tool for him, because he really, really enjoyed talking about his route, talking about what he had to look out for. That gave such a good insight for the social worker and the young person. And it was they looked at the map together as they were driving, and then afterwards they sat down with this or similar map and worked out what was going on. So he could say on the side where it says avoid, that he was scared in that area and he would never go there on his own. A little bit further up, he said he needed to be with friends, 2 people, to feel safe, that he needed to stay on the main road. On the other side, there weren't worries. He wouldn't look around and plan his route. So he had a safe side and a danger side, so to say. And we then realized, because at the top it says use of Snapchat maps to plan route or see what people are out. So me being older, I don't really use Snapchat, only to contact my son, to be fair. But on Snapchat, you can apparently see other people who use Snapchat walking around, or where their location is. So it was really interesting for us to see that this young boy had to really plan every day his route, had to check Snapchat to see is someone out who might be dangerous for us. So he was seen by others as maybe the troublemaker, because he always got into fights, or seemingly so for other people, although he was targeted by others. So he was seen a little bit as the troublemaker, but we really got an insight into how structured his day-to-day planning was, just to go from home to school. And we could work with that and looked at safe areas and got an insight into his life world, really, who are his friends, and what we could do to make his route safer. And thinking outside that box, if you think more strategically or politically, you could use these things to really do planning with the council or whatever. If there's areas that young people feel really frightened, you can do better planning for that, more lighting or more police, if there's areas where there's risks of exploitation, if you know what I mean. You can do disruption in those areas. So that was just, although these are only just 2 little examples of direct work, but really resonate with me in terms of life world orientation and social pedagogy. And I'm happy to share these tools, but yeah, and happy to take any questions. I think there's some things in the chat, but Gabriel, I don't know if you want to let Martin and Renny talk.
Yeah, we'll do the presentations first, and then we can take some questions. But thanks very much for sharing those examples with us. I think they really show lots of things very nicely that focus on the everyday and on kind of helping people navigate the kinds of challenges that they encounter in their practice, and to be really pragmatic about like, what can we actually do to kind of just start to extend that, just start to make their life more, help them make their life more meaningful, more successful, tackling domestic abuse, to then kind of see how that changes their cultural genogram, those relationships, for instance, and helping celebrate those results as well seems really important. And I also really like that map, because it gives a really good insight, as you said, into someone's life world, into how they see their reality. And I, as a social worker or social pedagogue, might be completely fine with going into some of those areas that young person isn't. And so I wouldn't necessarily know what's going on for them. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much. I'm keen to hear a little bit from Martin at Camphill, not least because Camphill obviously have historically been very focused on sharing the life world of the children, young people and adults that they support in their Camphill communities. And so life world orientation in that sense has always been close to Camphill's hearts. In that sense, Martin, you've got a really interesting example as well about like how you can help people develop skills within their life world and using the everyday, as well as special experiences that help enhance their everyday experience. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yes, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Belfast, close by. I will briefly share a little bit some questions that I like to ask practitioners in our training, and then I will share a very specific example of a young friend of mine with autism, focusing a little bit on really entering into the life world, going towards, and then also looking at skills that are transferable far beyond the actual specific activity. So, as we know in social pedagogy, to recognize the potential in the other, we really need to create a space for that to unfold, and to really be aware of this intricate learning process, to sharpen our pedagogical observation, to develop our tools, and to be, which I think is often undervalued, to be open to learning ourselves. I often ask, when have you last learned a practical skill yourself? After school, after your driving license, And many people need to think very hard. When have I last learned a practical skill? Because as adults, we tend to be very intellectual in our learning. Yet the young people we support often need to learn the skills much more systematic and broken down into micro steps. Imitation often doesn't come natural, as we know, and we cannot expect someone to learn something if we aren't learning something ourselves. Coherent co-evolution only happens when we practice what we preach and walk our talk, as we know. So how do we then not expect the young person or the adult to come into our world, but how do we as practitioners actually go towards their world? And how can we create an environment in which the person can let us in as such? So there's about 8 questions that I like that really help, I find, for practitioners to reflect about this a little bit. The question such as, who are you deep down? Who are you? How can I reach you? What have you learned already? And what skills or life skills could you still develop? What are your interests and your talents? How can we spark curiosity and find motivation together? What ails you, in the old English way of asking? What is your challenge? And at the same time, what is your potential? And most importantly, what environment do we need to create together in order to help your potential to unfold? And what do you need me to do as practitioner? And how do you need me to act so that you can allow me to let you in? And I found in this example that I'm about to share, it's just it's a very specific example, but it's a beautiful metaphor for the bigger picture of a success moment, and also looking at the fabric of learning, if you wish. And okay, so I'll quickly share the example first, and then I'll share some thoughts about it. So long story short, I usually have an hour. This is 5 minutes. Young man, autism, 2013, very, you would say, compulsive, very much caught, for the lack of a better word, caught in obsessive compulsive autistic patterns. Attention, and not only in autism, generally attention is a very intricate thing, and it can often be very short. Our attention span these days have become very short, and in this case attention was very flickery, either all outs and abouts, or very sheltered, where the world became a little bit too much, and there was a real challenge for a continuation of attention flow. And we went into a sports hall, and we played, and we put all the sports equipment that we could find outs and abouts, and over about 3 months of weekly practice, we narrowed it down to really look at what are the interests and talents and motivations of this young man. And we went from play towards practice and skill. And we went from everything towards jumping high and towards partner acrobatic and balance, working with the sense of balance. And there was one moment when it would always take about a minute or two until this young man could channel his attention and his focus to be ready to engage in the partner acrobatic, say climbing up on the knees, holding the hands, and balancing there. And then there was one moment which was very special, because suddenly he was there, he was ready, giving his hand, creating eye contact, and he was focused. One of the first times I had seen a continuous flow of attention for an extended period of time. He climbed up, he was there, and it felt like his autism had become secondary just for that moment, and the skill at hand was first. Powerful. That was a powerful moment. Afterwards, we explored it further. I thought, okay, where can we challenge this continuation of attention flow and concentration a little bit longer than just a short moment? So we learned how to ride the bicycle. If you're on a bicycle and you're rolling, you can't just get distracted in your sensory world. You first need to apply your willpower and pull the brakes in order to stop and then meet any sensory or compulsive needs. After the bicycle, he wanted to learn the unicycle, and we did. And with the unicycle, much more than the bicycle, you need to pre-calculate any little bump in the path ahead of you before it comes. So that level of attention was really revolutionary for this young man at this time. At the beginning of the bicycle learning, the bicycle went flying into the bushes, and he said, the bicycle is broken. And I actually, over the next couple of weeks, learned that he actually thought the bicycle was broken. The bicycle was not working. And then we realized together that learning happens over time. Learning happens through repetition, through trying again and trying again and trying again. And then you can learn anything if you stick with it. So that understanding of the process of learning itself still was something developing. And now he rides the unicycle freely. And the reason why this story is quite profound, and I use it in training, is really, first of this environment of playing, of not controlling the outcome, of just giving a space for exploration and then slowly discovering together where are the interests and where is the fun as well. In between, we took the partner acrobatic practice to the swimming pool, where failing became a big splash sidewards or forwards or backwards. Great fun and a lot more safe than in the hall. And then we took it back out of the water. So in a way, it really helped him to maintain his attention himself, to create autonomy in his own flow of attention, and to almost restore some of the sensory relationships and enable sensory autonomy. This breaking skills down into micro steps, there was a great consistency throughout the process, took a lot of patience and perseverance. Temple Grandin talks about the gentle push, to be gentle, but yet very consequently. Learning involves friction and therefore always some resistance. And really discovering the moments where there's shared lived experience and learning things together, having fun, common third, walking in front, besides, and behind. And that self-maintained attention really is a fundamental life skill. I almost call it the basis of learning. If you cannot maintain your attention, it's very difficult to learn anything. Therefore, this little practical example with balance, partner acrobatic, and circus skills really opened a whole world for this young man, because he suddenly realized how learning happens and what it takes and how to have sensory autonomy and maintain his own flow of attention for an extended period of time and take charge and ownership, and sometimes let the autism be secondary.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Martin. That's such a lovely example of what we mean by more successful every day and how we can actually work with people, support them in their life worlds so that their everyday experience is really enhanced. And if they learn to unicycle as a result of that as well, then that's an amazing skill to show off, I guess. So thanks for sharing that. I'm really looking forward now to Renny's contribution, not least because I think there's also something about Lifeworld that is about our ability to kind of really tune in and empathize and really understand what people might be experiencing within their life world, within their context. And I think in Bradford in particular, there's been a lot of attention been paid to recruiting social workers from the local community to be reflective of the local community's diversity. And I think, Renny, your example speaks very much to how you can use your own experience to kind of really connect to people's life world. So I'll hand over to you now.
Yes, sure. Can you hear me, everyone? Well, yeah, fab. Great. So basically, I was assigned to work with a young person, and he's a school leaver. So I was meant to carry out the Let's Connect assessment with her to identify what she would like to see happening after school. Obviously, her mom is the main carer. Doesn't speak well English. I remember when I went in first, she would be hesitating to speak to me in English. She'd be like, "Oh, I can't speak English, and I'm not really good," and things like that. And she would just literally wait for the interpreter to come in before she would speak to me. And that kind of bothered me because obviously it kind of reminded me of myself because I'm originally from Germany. So when I came, I had obviously thought I was good in English, but just to find out in school, no, not really. But yeah, I had that sense as well when I came to this country that, oh, my English wasn't good, and would sometimes hesitate to speak or be mindful of my accent or spelling or saying things wrong and things like that. And I could really empathize with this young person's mom because for her, she thought like she couldn't speak and she would make grammar mistakes and things like that. So I was kind of thinking about it. How can I kind of act positively towards her to speak more, gain confidence in speaking, and also obviously, as you guys know, yes, we work person-centered. It's all about the individual, the young person. But I do think that parents, carers, whoever is in the life of the individual, and it's very important as well because they hold that valuable information that we need to have in order to help us with any sort of assessment. So obviously reminded myself of the sessions that we had with Gabriel and Ali, and they introduced us the 3Ps model. So the 3Ps model is a good model to use if you're looking into building a trusting relationship with an individual, an authentic relationship with an individual. That's the model to go with, I would recommend. So it's got 3 sections. So it's got the personal self, where you're drawing upon, knowledge, like knowledge, law knowledge, like all your knowledge as you use as a social worker. And then it's got the personal self, where you are trying to work with the individual. How can you engage with the individual? And it's very person related. And then it comes to the third one is the private self, which I use in this example. So it's about sharing your own experience with an individual. Obviously, I was mindful with mom when I was sharing my own experience with her. Is it beneficial? Is it going to be beneficial towards her? And that sort of thing. So then I went obviously back again, and then obviously I had an interpreter first again. And I took that moment kind of, how can I tackle this? Obviously, remember the 3Ps model. So I said to myself, okay, let's use the private self today and see how that goes. So I had a good conversation with her, kind of asked her why she thinks her English is not good, and kind of told her obviously that I found it was really good, and she should just continue. And she was like, no, it's not good, and blah, blah, and that sort of thing. And then I kind of shared my experience. Obviously, I was born in Germany, came here, and I was mindful of my English, and sometimes will hesitate not to speak and that sort of thing. But a good teacher told me you just need to speak, and the more you speak, the better you get, and that sort of thing. And obviously, if you do speak wrong or I say anything wrong, people will just, correct you, and obviously in a nice way, hopefully. But yeah, and she then kind of said, oh, really? So, so you couldn't speak English that well as well? I said, yeah. And she kind of then shared her experience with me. That kind of enabled us then to, look more with her experience. And my sharing mine opened kind of that conversation where she was sharing her experience, like telling me, how she loves to explore education and how it has been for her, not being able to speak as much. She tends to speak more in her language because she hasn't built much of friendship outside her family and things like that. And and she's sometimes shy when it goes to appointment and things like that. She struggles and all that sort of thing. And I kind of said, look at me now. I once couldn't speak, and yet I could speak, but then I made mistakes as well, just as you are, and see where I am now, and that kind of gave her hope. And so then obviously I left the visit. She looked really, really encouraged. That's how I was, I got the impression. So next time when I went back out, I could see a change in her, because usually she will wait for the introverted to come in. But yeah, when I got back out, she was just speaking to me. She was just literally continuously speaking to me, and and not waiting for the invitation. We had a good conversation, and that has kind of stayed with her now, because obviously having that discussion, me sharing, has enabled her to see, actually, if she can do it, hold on a moment, I can do that as well. And now she just speaks to me in English, and she'll just tell me, what's going on at home and things like that. And like I said, yes, it is about the person, but obviously it's really important also to get a good relationship with the individuals that they, main carers, family members, all that sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, they are not experts. We come with our expertise. The individual himself has got the expertise of the life, but then also the parents hold their expertise. It's all about sharing one another. And I think, like one mentioned before, obviously it's a learning process. We learn from one another, and that's how we obviously enable people to have whatever they need in place and that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Renny. And I think your example shows really beautifully the importance of building genuine, authentic relationships that enable you to really understand the life world and enable the person you support to share more about their life world as well. So, because without being able to connect and to learn from the mom, you wouldn't have had anywhere near the kinds of insights that you needed. So that's why I really love your example. So thanks for sharing that. We've got about 12 minutes or so now for any questions, comments, any further thoughts that anyone else might have. So feel free to just unmute yourself or raise your hand or whatever you would like to do. There's one question in the chat already, which was aimed at Bianka, and the question was if this is used with all families in child protection and children in need process as opposed to some community.
Yeah, we use it with all families, really, and it's good practice to do the cultural genogram with everyone we work with, from assessment to child protection or child in need planning.
Great. Thanks very much, Bianca. Any other comments from people? Now's a good time. Lois has got her hand up. Go, Lois.
I have always got a question or a comment. I can never not say anything. Renny's point was really good. It really reminded me of when talking about the 3 Ps and life world orientation, that thing about being constantly reflective about whose needs and whose agenda are we kind of meeting here. And I think that helps you kind of reflect and think, am I rooting myself in that? Am I being alongside that person in their world? Am I actually genuinely listening to what they're saying and from their point of view? So I think that's always a really good, so I think it's really great that Renny mentioned the 3 Ps, because I think those are really good reflective points to think about. Whose agenda's being met, whose needs are being met, and is this coming from my private part of the 3 Ps as well? Is it more about, you know, my need to help this person move on?
Yeah, exactly. And what can we actually make personal, because it enables us to connect with the people we support, and has therefore is part of the professional remit that we have. And, you know, it might well be that, Renny, usually you might keep all of that private to yourself, because that's, you know, that's okay as well. And there might be situations, as you showed, where it makes sense to bring that into the personal, because it enables you to connect, and it's about the needs and the benefits of the people you support, and it makes you more human. So, yeah, absolutely. That's a great example.
Sorry, can I just add? Because you just said human. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like sometimes when we work with individuals, for some reason, strange reason, they tend to see us different. I think because we've got the badge on and everything. I think it's really important to just show the individual, hey, hold on a moment, I'm just a human as you. You know, if that badge is taken away, you know, I am just a human, just as you are. And that's how I tend to practice when I go into family. I don't go, I know best. I kind of go, okay, you tell me about yourself and your situation. I'm here to listen, and then hopefully we can find, you know, a way to kind of meet your needs, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's really important to show that human side when you're working with individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for highlighting that point. Whilst I'm waiting for anyone else to add any other thoughts, I think there's also something for me about, you know, we often get examples about sort of a lack of life world orientation, if you want, when, for instance, a child enters into care and suddenly they're given this really nice spacious bedroom, there's this open plan living room, and it's very different to the situation that they used to, in terms of, you know, perhaps sharing one small bed sit with mom and 2 siblings, or having to find spaces to hide because, you know, there might be any domestic abuse happening, and suddenly you're in the space where you're not able to hide, where you're all by yourself. And for many of us, that would be like the dream. That would be like just such a lovely, caring environment. And yet it really jars potentially with children's lived experience of what their world used to look like, and what they feel comfortable about, just what they're used to. So I think there's also the question about how can we help make those transitions in the life world. I'm not arguing that we should provide less decent accommodation in that respect, but that we need to be mindful about, like, how young people might respond to that, or just how anybody might respond to that kind of really stark contrast between what their life world used to be like and what their life world might be expected to be like now, when they've been taken into care, for instance, you know, end up in a children's home far away from their own physical life world before, and what that might mean for their behavior, for their sense of safety, for their sense of comfort and connection. So I'm curious, I know we've got a few people who work in residential there in the group here. I'm curious about your thoughts. Greg, I will just volunteer you then, if we can hear you. No, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Unlucky. So will I go with Phil Cody then? I know you're highly experienced in residential care as well. what are your thoughts in that sense, and in terms of Lifeworld orientation and what that means for us in residential childcare?
Well, I kind of began in residential childcare by living in a rural Steiner place as well. It wasn't officially Camphill at the time because it was kind of hardcore in those days. Everybody had to be a volunteer to call yourself a Camphill place in the 1980s. So we were kind of like what most Camphill places would be like just now. And I guess my kind of, Martin talking about that really brought me back to those days. And I've never found anything since then, I guess, that I kind of had the level of intensity and the level of sharing your lives with each other that experience has. Although I do think it's possible to bring some of that into more traditional residential childcare if you could retain something of that kind of orientation. And it does feel as though, certainly at the time that I was doing it, it kind of felt like everything was against us in terms of trying to maintain the level of connection that I wanted to maintain. And all of a sudden, it kind of feels like the world is changing and moving back in that direction again, where it does feel like there's much more kind of value of, valuing of the kind of the importance of connections and the importance of that kind of mutual sharing of the life world of the person you're working with, but also some sharing of your life world as well. And it does feel as though there's something hopeful about the direction that things are moving in at the moment in terms of that. My only concern about it is I feel as though we've had the last 20 years where people have been getting pushed away from that kind of orientation. And now all of a sudden in Scotland with Promise, there's a kind of expectation that people can just flip and now have a totally different perspective. But I'm not sure that people's experience of the last 20 years is going to prepare them to do that well. And to suddenly, I feel as though my experience, because of where I started from, has been to embrace the kind of complexity of relationships where you maximize the potential of the relationship, and where there is a great deal of kind of sharing of life worlds. But yeah, I think it might be a struggle for us to make the changes that people are asking us to make as a sector now, because everything in the last 20 years has tried to discourage us from doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a beautiful point that you raised about kind of almost the meeting of our respective life worlds, though. I think that's really worth highlighting, because no matter what the environmental conditions might be about, what's the policy direction, etc., there's still something that we can do in terms of how we might just kind of facilitate that engagement between our life world and what others might learn from us, from our own experiences, and what we can learn by engaging with the people we support and their life worlds. So thanks for raising that. I'm mindful that Pretty's got her hand up as well, so I'll just want to give her a couple of minutes before we need to draw the webinar to a close. Pretty.
I'll do a very quick one. My thoughts are not entirely well formulated, but I'm so intrigued by this that I need to learn more, is what I'm thinking. So you'll get an email from me, Gabriel. But one of the things that I'm thinking about is I work in perinatal mental health. And one of the things I came across, so on Friday, we have a mother and baby unit. And I saw a parent she's 18 years old and has lots of diagnoses. What does that mean for this lady who has got a baby? She is struggling to parent, and looking at the strengths and advocating for her with the psychiatrist and with other colleagues. Don't look at just how she's shouting at the baby, but actually she puts the appropriate rain cover on the baby's pushchair, and she puts the brakes on. And can we enter her world a little bit more, so we can look at her strengths and how can we create something for her, bearing in mind her template of parenting, as is with lots of young people we work with, is so poor and so inadequate to support her. And I don't know what I'm trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is I'm really enthused by what I heard today, and gives me a lot of room for creativity, even in the perinatal mental health, which is very different from what everybody else is coming from. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
That's an amazing example, because I think it shows really nicely that, like, you know, me having grown up with parents who were very supportive, being able to grow up with the kind of financial security, with kind of, you know, very limited stressors in my life, my ability to parent are very different to, say, a single mom who needs to worry about what to feed herself, you know, whether to feed her kids or herself, and all of those kinds of challenges. So for her to be able to parent in the exact same way as I might be able to is just an expectation that just has nothing to do with her lived reality, with her life world. So it's really important that we kind of start from what is her life world and what can we do to help her more meaningfully within that. And hopefully then she will recognize that actually she might have hopefully less reason to shout at her kids, but also to kind of recognize the little signs that there is love there, there's care there, there's attention there. And that's something that we can build on. So there's always that opportunity, that belief that people can learn, people need support sometimes to help keep some of the external stresses at bay, to help bring out the best in them. So thanks very much for sharing that. Thanks everybody for joining us and contributing, particularly Bianka and Martin and Renny. And I hope to see you all again soon. We haven't set the dates yet for any future webinars, but I'm sure we'll get to that very soon as well. And yeah, keep things going. So take care, everyone. Thanks.